President Muhammadu Buhari gets victory at the Election Petition Tribunal.
People's Democratic Party says it is heading to Supreme Court.
Next level in action as President Buhari tasks ministers on service delivery.
All ideas and projects that will contribute to achieving these goals shall be foremost in our deliberations.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we focus on matters arising from the Presidential Election Tribunal judgment.
All right, yesterday, Nigerians and indeed the rest of the world got treated to a major electoral verdict as the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal dismissed allegations of malpractices in the 2019 presidential poll.
Yes, indeed, Kingsley. The judgment is one many say is transparent with facts presented for all to see live on NTA network service and other media platforms. It lasted about 9 hours.
That's right, Kirian. The Presidential Election Petition Tribunal dismissed the petition of Atiku Abubakar and the People's Democratic Party against the victory of President Muhammadu Buhari during the 2019 election.
And in an unanimous decision, the tribunal ruled that Atiku and PDP failed to prove their case in every of the grounds entered in their appeal for the nullification of the victory of Buhari. It in fact held that most of the evidences presented by witnesses of Atiku Abubakar and the People's Democratic Party, PDP, were based on hearsay.
Well, the late judgment was delivered by Justice Mohammed Garba, and of course he was supported by 4 other justices of the tribunal. And it was to the effect that the petitioners had failed to prove their case, and thereby the tribunal dismissed the petition in its entirety, while the parties were directed to bear their respective costs.
Yes, indeed. And you recall that the PDP and Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, its presidential candidate, had, among other things, challenged the educational qualification of President Muhammadu Buhari to contest the election, alleged cases of overvoting, card reader malfunctioning, and, of course, electoral malpractices.
Well, looking at the prayers of the petitioners, as well as INEC's motion challenging the competence of the petitioners' counsel, that obviously was dismissed by the tribunal. And the application to also strike out the petition for the non-inclusion of the vice president, if you like, as lawyers would say, non-joinder of Vice President Osinbajo as a necessary party in the suit was also rejected by the tribunal.
As the motion on allegation of misconduct against security agencies has struck out as well, the tribunal also struck out some documents and of star witness Osita Chidoka's statement on the ground that they amount to amending the entire petition.
Well, the decision by the Election Petition Tribunal has, of course, generated wide-ranging comments by various analysts and all of those who have an interest in Nigeria's democracy, with a number of persons applauding the decision, saying that it is the beauty of democracy that once the polls are over and you go to a petition tribunal and the petition tribunal gives its decision, then you find opportunities of further strengthening not just the electoral system, but Nigeria's democracy. How true is that? And what does this decision and indeed all other things we have seen in the course of the electioneering and post-electionary period portend for the country's democracy? And how best should this tempo be sustained for effective development and governance? And in particular, what is the place of politics without bitterness in all of this? Answers to these questions and more, we shall find out from our guests as we evaluate matters arising from the decision of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. It's on that note we'd like to welcome you to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, live as always on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Kirin Umayo. It's indeed nice to have you join us this morning for this particular edition of the program. And the other segments that form part of the package will also be coming to you. Newspaper review, business news, sports, and others. First, let's join Abdulmalik Adio for the morning news. Hello, Abdulmalik.
Good morning and welcome to the morning news. The Presidential Election Petition Tribunal has dismissed the petition filed by Atiku Abubakar and the People's Democratic Party, PDP, challenging the February 23rd election of President Muhammadu Buhari. The five-man panel headed by Justice Muhammad Garba delivered a unanimous judgment in favor of President Muhammadu Buhari and All Progressives Congress, APC, and the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. The President Muhammadu Buhari has described his victory at the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal as victory for Nigerians who trooped out to overwhelmingly elect him for a second term in office. President Muhammadu Buhari dedicates the victory to God and to Nigerians as he commends the judiciary for dispensing justice without fear or favor. In a statement from the special advisor to the president on media and publicity, Femi Adesina, the president extends a hand of fellowship to those who felt aggrieved at the outcome of the election and went to court. President Muhammadu Buhari is quoted to say, "It is time for the country to move forward as a cohesive body, putting behind all bickering and potential distractions over an election in which Nigerians spoke clearly and resoundingly." End of quote. And the All Progressives Congress hails the judgment of the 2019 Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, dismissing in its entirety the petition filed by the People's Democratic Party and its presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar. Supporters of the party who spoke to NTA says the judgment in favor of President Muhammadu Buhari is well deserved.
On all the grounds that were canvassed upon today, the tribunal found none of them worthy enough to derail the election. In fact, the tribunal dismissed in its entirety the entire petition of the PDP, so we're glad.
Judgment has been delivered in our favor, and we are glad. The president that we have is a man of integrity.
We all know this is a people-oriented government, and again, I would like to congratulate the president, President Muhammadu Buhari. It's a win for Nigerians, it's a win for Nigeria, and it's also a win for the president.
In the meantime, the People's Democratic Party, PDP, says it is heading to the Supreme Court in the party's reaction to the ruling of the Presidential Election Petition Court. The party asks Nigerians to remain calm and not to lose hope.
A judgment has been given. We have a legal team. The legal team is going to study the judgment and advise us on the next step to take. So that's why we have been here for 9 hours.
Without a doubt, the next level agenda of President Muhammadu Buhari is in full flight with the maiden edition of the Executive Council meeting. The president reassures Nigerians that the next level Federal Executive Council will not fail in its responsibility of guaranteeing their safety, security, and prosperity. He made the promise while addressing members of the council ahead of their maiden meeting.
The majority of Nigerians who voted for us gave us a clear mandate. A, to enhance the security of lives and property across the entire country. B, to create a diversified and inclusive economy that will bring prosperity.
And the Minister of Labour and Employment, Chris Igige, says the federal government is determined to resolve the delay affecting the conclusion of negotiation on the consequential adjustment over the new national minimum wage.
The government will also want to put in place a presidential committee on salaries and allowances that will be in situ and be able to take requests after this consequential adjustment. But before then, that same committee will appraise the level of work or quantum of workload, and evaluate all cadres of work and come out with salaries and allowances that will be commensurate with each.
189 Nigerians evacuated from South Africa in the face of the xenophobic attacks have arrived at Murtala Mohammed International Airport. The returnees were conveyed by Air Peace aircraft Boeing 777 and landed at about 9:35 p.m. Nigerian time, while the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jeffrey Onyema, has commended Air Peace Airlines for the successful evacuation of the first batch of whaling Nigerians from South Africa. And that's the morning news. Good Morning Nigeria continues after this break.
This is to notify candidates who applied for Ahmadu Bello University and NTA TV College degree program in mass communication for 2019-2020 academic session that the post-UTME screening exercise has been scheduled to take place on Saturday, 21st September 2019. Venue, NTA TV College premises, Rayfield, Jos. Time, 9 a.m. Screening fee, 2,000 naira paid through the remitter platform in favor of NTA TV College Jos. Candidates who chose the college as second and third choices in the 2019 UTME examination scored 180 and above and willing to study at the college can also come for the exercise. Candidates who satisfy the above requirements are expected to come along with the originals of their O-level certificate, any of WAEC, NECO, or NABTEM, JAMB slip, birth certificate, indigenship certificate, and proof of payment. Direct entry candidates are expected to come along with their original diploma certificate, A-level results in addition to other credentials mentioned above. Registrar, Announcer.
Mommy is ready to receive me a bundle of joy. Mommy is making my home cleaner and safer. We are Dettol sure. Daddy is home. He must be germ-free. He needs to be Dettol sure. My clothes are so nice. We are Dettol sure.
Illnesses can happen at home too. That's why Dettol and me together will make my baby's home safe and to protect from up to 100 illness-causing germs. That's why moms want to be Dettol. Dettol Sure.
We are Dettol Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Please, did you hear that?
Of course I did. That is village Elmaster tune.
So, Auntie Amebo was not gossiping then?
Village Elmaster is celebrating 50 years.
50? Already? This is not a joke.
It is a national celebration. NTA and Village Elmaster family are commemorating 50 years.
Hey, please, tell me, when is our golden jubilee?
It is from the 8th to 11th of October, 2019.
I have to go and get ready. It's time to party.
Women. But we, men, will be there too.
Please.
The program is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Now, let's talk business. Now, Nigeria Export Processing Zone Authority strategizes on ways to bridge funding gap across economic zones as investors erase previous day loss with a gain of 51.54 billion naira on the floor of the exchange. Details of this and other financial stories with Abdul Karim Zomi.
Funding gap has remained a fundamental setback to the takeoff of the economic zones across the country. In view of this, the Nigeria Export Processing Zone Authority is considering the generation of 15 megawatts from independent power sources. This is targeted at special economic zones across the country as part of incentives for the purpose of ensuring an enabling environment for exports, manufacturing, and other commercial activities, thereby creating about 350,000 direct jobs and another 1 million indirect jobs.
The main funding gap we need in Calabar now is the IPP, which I say is about $45 million. When we do that, according to Calabar, everything is provided. We have the civil treatment plan, which we are yet to award. And we think that will cost us about 1 billion naira for the sewage treatment plant, and then the IPPP. So we get about 10 billion naira in Kano. I think infrastructure in Kano will be 100% completed as well. Then for the 7 new ones, the quantity surveyors which we engage, they're coming up with an in-house cost, which I'm sure in the next 3 or 4 weeks, we have an idea of the cost of providing infrastructure in these 7 secondary zones.
Meanwhile, the authorities say more than 40 billion naira finance is required for the takeoff of the special economic zones across the country. In the meantime, the Central Bank of Nigeria has issued regulations for payments and collections for public and private sectors in Nigeria. This is in line with the revision of guidelines on electronic payment of salaries, pensions, suppliers, and taxes in the country, with the purpose of regulating the end-to-end electronic payment of salaries, pensions, and other remittances, as well as revenue collections. And in other business developments, the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, says capital markets can serve as a key catalyst for Nigeria's economic growth and development, as it offers a credible platform for obtaining long-term financing. The acting Director General of the SEC, Ms. Mary Oduk, who stated this at a 2-day International Capital Market Conference in Lagos, noted that the implementation of the Commission's 10-year Capital Market Master Plan is already contributing to the growth and development of the Nigerian capital market, and by extension, the economy. The plan has over 100 initiatives to springboard the Nigerian capital market as one of the world's deepest and most liquid, and the largest in Africa by the year 2025. And next is the closing figures of activities on the floor of the Nigerian stock. With business news, Abdul Karim Zurbi.
All right, thank you very much for that business package. Next for us is a look at the front pages of today's newspapers.
Well, let's welcome Bayo Tebi, who is here to review stories making headlines in some national dailies. Bayo, you're welcome.
Good morning, Kirian. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, Bayo, good morning and welcome. Obviously, I mean, all the papers have as their lead story one common subject, and that is the verdict of the Election Petition Tribunal for the presidential election. Let's begin with the New Telegraph. New Telegraph says with a kicker, Tribunal, Atiku has no case. Says President Buhari eminently qualified and duly elected. President, I was unruffled. APC is victory for rule of law. PDP, judgment and assault on Nigeria's justice system. Tinubu, verdict vindicates Buhari's character and electoral victory. CUPP, that's the Conference of Political Parties, Nigerians, not Atiku, are losers. And Lawan and Pajabiamila, Kalu, and governors hail judgment. Now, when you take a look at the front page of the New Telegraph, there's a sidebar there that appropriately illustrates or gives in highlights what the tribunal decided. Issues in favor of each of the parties. Atiku Abubakar, that his petition is competent. 2, he is a Nigerian by birth. And 3, his lawyer, Levi Uzuoku, SAN, is enrolled at the Supreme Court and is known to the Nigerian Bar Association. For President Muhammadu Buhari, 1, possesses minimum academic qualification to contest the election. 2, duly elected as the president with lawful votes. 3, he did not provide false information about his academic qualification. And 4, did not need to attach any credentials to his form submitted to INEC. And 5, petitioners failed to establish a nexus between their petition and documentary evidence. That's as I said, that's also the lead story for Daily Trust. in this case, he's talking about the next step. So Atiku heads to Supreme Court as Buhari wins as tribunal.
Yes, and the Sun newspaper also captured it. It said Buhari floors Atiku with some writers. Ex-VP PDP failed to discharge burden of proof over president's non-qualification, says tribunal. President's victory good for Nigeria. Carlo, PDP, APC, Obi, Wike, Tinubu react. And if you also go to Nigerian Pilot newspaper, is also the story there. Presidential election panel. Atiku has no case. Tribunal opposed Buhari's victory. We've been vindicated, says the president. PDP, CUPP reject verdict as opposition party held to Supreme Court. And it's also on Daily Times as the lead story. Presidential poll, why Buhari floored Atiku, PDP at tribunal. With two writers, tribunal says Buhari eminently qualified to run. Ex-VP's petition lacks merit. Mixed reactions trail judgment as PDP heads to Supreme Court. So these are how the papers captured it.
Yes. Well, the verdict now is already known, and the verdict has been described by the spokesperson for the president as the victory for Nigerians who trooped out to overwhelmingly elect the president for a second time. Mr. Femi Adesina says that the president dedicated the victory to God and Nigerians. He says, the president said, good conscience, fear no evil report. We are now vindicated. He extended a hand of fellowship to the aggrieved who exercised their right to challenge the victory in court. It's now time for the country to move forward as one cohesive body. Meanwhile, the issues that were canvassed were 5. One was the qualification of the president to contest election. A second was an alleged lying on oath about his qualification. The issue of the transmission of election result via server, and allegations of criminal manipulation of election during the election by agents of the respondents. And finally, the fact that he, from his own computation, won majority of votes and should be declared. But the tribunal, the 5-man panel tribunal headed by Justice Mohammed Garba, in their own ruling, ruled that President Muhammadu Buhari is eminently qualified and did not perjure. And this takes its root from, if you recall, there was the case of Senator Demola Adeleke, which went to Supreme Court, and it was ruled that the position of the law is, did he go through the secondary school and he didn't have to have a certificate. Once you have gone through the secondary school, in the context of the provision of the law, you are qualified. You don't necessarily have to have a certificate. So it's not the first instance that such has come up. On the other issues, Atiku Abubakar was declared to be a Nigerian, and he said that no electronic conduct of election by collation, transmission of result at all levels of the 2019 election. And the proof that election was unlawfully won by the PDP was not proved in court. The tribunal concluded that it is inevitable and unavoidable to conclude that the petition has failed to prove any of the allegations in the paragraph 15 of its petition. Meanwhile, there has been some reaction. The People's Democratic Party says it rejects the outcome and describing the ruling as a subversion of justice. The party chairman says he will consult with the counsel for the party and decide on the next line of action. The All Progressive Congress said that the PDP failed to canvass their case in court and resorted to litigation in the media and misleading people by public opinion. For me, as a layman, you remember what my compatriots from Warri will say. They say, no be person who first call police, now in the win case. This time around now, it be like say, no be the number of witnesses we person call. Now the determined person to win case, because the witness if he become weakness for that person's case.
I know. All right, I mean, you are going to prove worry after this. Okay, now just before we leave this subject matter, you know, cartoons can be very interesting
and illustrative.
Yeah, there is a cartoon on the front page of a New Telegraph. Usually, cartoons are caricatures of circumstances, events, or persons. Let's take a look at that cartoon now. You see there, it says 2019 Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal. You see Buhari and Atiku. That's supposed to be a knockout punch there from Buhari to Atiku. As I said, it's a caricature, but this is what it is. Both men are professional politicians, and assuming they are also professional boxers, I'm sure both of them will be disqualified in that fight because they are not supposed to have a headgear, neither should they have their glasses on in the course of a fight.
Exactly.
Well, headgears are permitted for amateur boxers.
That's why I said they are professional.
Yes. But these ones are not protective headgears.
They are amateur boxers.
All right.
There are other stories.
Other stories, yes. Let's turn to Daily Sun newspaper. Just on the right-hand side of the nameplate, xenophobia. 189 return from South Africa. That's on page 8. And then other stories there. We collected 5.5 million naira for ABU students, 20 million for Turkish citizens, but that's from kidnappers now. And I read just one or two lines, it's an inside story on page 5, where they also said that the police also seized about 57 AK-47 rifles and other weapons, and the cartridges of sorts and ammunition of sorts in greater quantity. Now, bandits sack 3 communities in Niger. That's pages 4 and 5. As 7 abducted on Kaduna-Abuja highway rescued. Minimum wage, federal government to fast-track negotiations is on page 3. That's all on Daily Sun.
All right. Of course, there are 2 other very important stories, Kirian.
Yes.
You read one of them on the front page, but this is just before we take the stories. This is the challenge. The day a big story breaks, if you have an important story, that other important story will be drowned out by that big story. The Federal Executive Council met yesterday. Yes, and one of the stories that emerged from that meeting is here again on the front page of New Telegraph. We also have it on the front page of the Daily Trust. It says FEC raises VAT to 7.2%. Federal Council raises VAT, that's the value added tax, to 7.2%, approves 10.07 trillion naira for 2020 budget. That story again can be found on the front page of the Daily Trust. It says federal government raises VAT to 7.2%, and the same approval there that has been given. Another headline there from the Daily Trust says South Africa, 188 Nigerians arrive Lagos, page 6, and borders will remain closed. Customs Controller General says, that's page 4. And at the foot of the front page of the New Telegraph, it says xenophobia, New Telegraph now, xenophobia, 187 Nigerians return. I'm talking about the New Telegraph. Xenophobia, 187 Nigerians return from South Africa, and government gives returnees 40,000 recharge cards each. Kira, I'm sure you have that story as well on the returnees, with some of them saying, no place like home, we love Nigeria, thank you, Nigeria. The chairman of Air Peace, Alan Onyema, hugged each of the returnees.
Well, from the report, actually, the Nigerians that were supposed to be evacuated were about 239. 239 males, 83 females. But by the time they got to the airport, the South Africa immigration insisted on performing their duty. Throughout the process, they eventually cleared the number that arrived. And this number has been conflicting. Some are reporting 187, leadership reported 178, and others are reporting 179. But the fact remains that 7 of them were allegedly arrested for entering South Africa illegally. Some others were turned back because they had children that did not have the required documentation. The touching aspect of it is that when they arrived, apart from embracing the chairman, Alan Onyema, who volunteered to bring them back to the country, I was seriously enamored when I heard them singing the national anthem. And I felt touched that at least east, north, south, or west, there's always no place like home.
And that will also teach a lesson to the younger generation of Nigerians, who are desirous of leaving the country, for some of them for no good reason, because if you consider the amount of money they spend in getting their documentation and traveling out of the country, it is enough to settle or to stop something doing here in Nigeria. Now, all the years they spent there, I saw one on one of the foreign media, a Mozambican, who said, look, I have lived in South Africa for 30 years, but I am leaving, for obvious reasons, both of my children and what have you. So one must consider certain factors before you take off from Nigeria to elsewhere, where you think that life is easier and better.
Well, the chairman for the Diaspora Commission was there also at the airport, among the other federal agencies that received them. I'm glad to hear that they said they've been given a recharge card to enable them contact their families, but also I'm told that they'll be giving other stipends to enable them travel to link up with their families. Now, talking about the reports about kidnappers, soldiers of Operation Thunderstrike have rescued the 7 persons kidnapped at Regina over last weekend. The 7, including the 7-year-old girl, were traveling in Okin Express from Offa to Kaduna. The kidnappers were 15, and they also have been arrested. They were all dressed in military camouflage. Victim says that they had to trek for about 3 hours to reach the kidnappers' den, which was on a hilltop. He said they were kept on that rock for 5 days, day and night, rain and shine, without any food. And every day they were beaten. They were negotiating for a ransom between 10 million, which later on dropped to 2 million. They beat their victims every day. They were rescued by the Defense Headquarters team of Operation Thunderstrike on Wednesday. The commander of the team, Colonel Ibrahim Gambari, has a word for people who try to drive on the highway at night, especially on the Kaduna Express Highway. He says that it's because the kidnappers mount their illegal roadblock, that is why they are able to arrest people. And that was why Governor El-Rufai declared that there should be no roadblock on that highway. And therefore, if you are driving on the highway at night and you see any roadblock, you quickly do a detour and leave, because they are the kidnappers. On the other hand, the Police High Command also paraded kidnappers they have arrested, about 58 of them. These include those who kidnapped 3 ABU students and collected a ransom of 5.5. The others are a gang that abducted Turkish nationals in Kwara, and they were also paraded. In fact, a gang member said that he got a sum of 450,000 from his share, but his gang members actually collected 10 million, and they told him that it was 6 million they collected. So within themselves, they were already collected. There was other one too, 8 others who were suspected to be involved in kidnapping a Kaduna State lawmaker. And in all, 18 AK-47 arms, 1,233 ammunition and other armaments were recovered from them. This Operation Thunderstrike is a combination of a task force set up by the Defense Headquarters. It involves the Army, the Navy, the police, the DSS, and all the security agencies. And so this collaboration is working effectively to nit the kidnappers' activities in the border. And this time around, they are taking the war to the kidnappers, straight to their den.
And air power is actually required to do that, because when one has to trek for about 3 hours into the den of kidnappers, that's a distance, from the highway. So, and you need to use a helicopter or any available kind of air power to locate the position before you can even attack.
Kieran, I mean, there's no question about what you have just said. This is not warfare, as it were, but the nature of warfare was altered dramatically with the rise of air power. Because once you have area superiority, you can fish out where your enemies are and then pound them and then get the ground troops to move in. Air power here, of course, will also include, the use of drones.
Exactly.
The use of drones, part of the platforms will be involve the use of drones and just, helicopters or gunships, let's well say an helicopter mounted with machine gun. That's what's called a gunship. And the way you have these elements, unfortunately, the security agencies are trying their best, but the bandits and the kidnappers appear to have proliferated. If you recall, there was a time, the menace of pipeline vandalism around the Arepo area, the boundary between Lagos and Ogun, was so rife. I mean, the residents there, including journalists who were living in one of the estates, were always at the mercy of the pipeline vendors. At some point, the Air Force had to use its platform to strafe the pipeline vendors. And after that, I'm not sure we heard any of the stories from those vendors.
No, for kidnapping, sometimes it's a difficult thing. There was once a kidnapped victim, once revealed that while they were being held, the Air Force came and located them. And what the kidnappers did was to bring them to the edge of the cliff and threaten to shoot them. So the Air Force had to withdraw. Sometimes it's difficult, but they are the experts and they know how to go about that. But meanwhile, you recall that we had 66,000 or more pilgrims that perform in this year's Hajj. The National Hajj Commission has concluded the operation. Their last flight, Flight 91, arrived yesterday, and they have concluded in evacuating all the Nigerian pilgrims that went. In fact, the National Hajj Commission went out of its way to airlift and assist Nigerians who were stranded. They were taken in by some illegal tour operators, but the National Hajj Commission helped to evacuate it. The chairman of the commission, Barrister Abdullahi Mohammed, has commended and congratulated all the pilgrims' welfare across the country, the state officials, the medical team, and the media team. And all things being equal, all our pilgrims are home. In this year's Hajj, the death casualty were very low. About 20 pilgrims, I think, as at the last count, had unfortunately died in the pilgrimage.
All right, Bayo, thank you. Let's return to the newspaper. Let's make mention of some of the stories. The Nigerian pilot, for instance, let's go to the bottom of the Nigerian pilot newspaper, to the bottom, so we'll get some stories there. While we merged, created new ministries, says Buhari. Then cancer, major health challenge in Nigeria, it's on page 11. NAF to launch first female combat fighter pilots. That's a good one, it's on page 6. Onyema leads delegation to ECOWAS ministerial meeting. Roga, Kano government gets $90 million from Islamic Development Bank Fund.
Okay, Kieran and Bayo will take the editorial, and it's coming from the New Telegraph newspaper at page 15. No to selective rewards and reception of athletes. No to selective rewards and reception of athletes. That's the title of the editorial. In part, the editorial reads, there should be equal appreciation for our athletes and national teams. If football gets huge attention, at least other sports should not be treated with disdain.
Well, before I do that, can I quickly draw attention that the body of the first president of Zimbabwe, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, arrived Harare yesterday. It was received at the Robert Mugabe International Airport. He has been described as a hero of Zimbabwe. The body was taken to one command barracks for funeral services. There have been some disagreement about the place of his burial. Government has proposed that he should be buried at the Heroes Arcade in the outskirts of Harare. The family are contending that he should be buried in his Shona homeland, or country home in the village. Meanwhile, talking about the editorial, yes, the question of selective reward has been challenging as far as sportsmen and athletes are concerned. Do you know that if you go to Olympics, football is one of the several events. You get 1 gold for football. You can earn as many goals as there are many track and field, swimming and other events. But however, in all instances, football seems to be taking dominance over all the sports. And athletes and sportsmen are challenging this. In fact, it happened even in the United States. At the last World Cup, Women's World Cup, the victorious American team went home chanting that equal reward for men and women. They are fighting against discriminatory rewards between the men team and the female team. And for us here in Nigeria, the preponderance of rewards seems to favor the football than the other athletes. And those who have won more medals for us are in fact the Paralympics. They won more goals than even their able-bodied athletes.
All right, Bayo, let's thank you. But if you ask me, football, sports is about followership. You know, when we talk about followership, where is the pendulum swinging to? You know, I mean, when you do track, is very fine. But football is a force, if you ask me. On this note, we'd like to thank Bayo for being part of our show this morning, as always.
Thank you, too.
Thank you indeed. Well, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we will delve into the focus of today's edition of the program. Stay with us.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
Digital studio equipment is a critical aspect of modern television that requires special skills for their operation and maintenance. These skills define the content and output of television and are acquired only through professional training and experience. NTA TV College JOS is organizing a special 4-week intensive course on digital studio equipment maintenance for engineers and technical officers in public and private television stations. The course will equip participants with modern techniques, technologies, and skills for effective and efficient operation and maintenance of digital studio equipment. Also, a special 4-week course on intermediate photojournalism and photography will run simultaneously. It is an essential course for photojournalists, photographers, public relations, and information officers to upscale their skills and capacities in photojournalism. Participants will be equipped with modern skills in photo editing, studio, and outdoor lighting, and more in just a few weeks. The venue for both courses is the serene and secure environment of NTA TV College near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos. Date 16 September to 11th October 2019. Course fee 100,000 naira only per participant. Accommodation inclusive. For more inquiries, please call 0803-314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. NTA TV College Jos, training you to be the best you want to be.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, yesterday, the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal delivered its judgment on the petition filed by the candidate as well as the party of Atiku Abubakar, that's to say the PDP, in the connection with the elections that took place in February this year. In the judgment, the tribunal declared that President Muhammadu Buhari, candidate of the All Progressives Congress, was winner. And this the tribunal did by dismissing in entirety the petition of both Atiku Abubakar and the PDP. To set the tone for our conversation on matters arising from that decision yesterday, let's join our correspondent, Vera Chimuba, who was at the tribunal.
In a 9-hour painstaking judgment of the Presidential Election Court, the court first resolved all preliminary applications before delving into the substantive issues. The 5 grounds of petition include non-qualification and false information, non-election by majority of lawful vote cast, corrupt practices, and non-compliance with the Electoral Act. The court resolved all issues in favor of President Buhari, APC, and INEC. On the issue of non-qualification and false information, the court held that President Buhari is not only qualified, but eminently qualified to run for the presidency of the country, as contained in Form 199A, which showed how he obtained his WAEC certificate in 1961 with 5 credits in relevant subjects. On the issue of non-majority of lawful vote cast, the court held that the petitioners failed to prove the allegations of irregularities in any of the states where they allege overvoting took place or presented documents to prove the allegation. Non-compliance with the Electoral Act was also another issue raised, but the court said the Electoral Act made no provision for electronic conduct of elections, collation and transmission of results at all levels in Nigeria. The chairman of the panel, Justice Muhammad Garba, however, commended the brilliance exhibited by the counsel in their written addresses.
And now joining us in the studio to discuss the election tribunal judgment matters arising, we have a Professor Osamen Osumbo. He's a professor of law. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Yes, and also in Abuja studio with us is Yunus Usman. Yunus Usman is a legal practitioner. It's indeed a pleasure to have you, Yunus Usman, in our studio today.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, also here with us in the studios is another familiar face, Dr. Abdul Rahman Abu Hamiso is a public affairs analyst. Dr. Hamiso, pleasure to have you again on the program.
The pleasure is all mine.
Okay, and also just to indicate that Professor Osumbo is a two-term senator and also a former governor of Edo State. From Port Harcourt, another of our old regular guest, Festus Oguche, lawyer, is joining us. Mr. Oguche, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Oh, thank you, Kingsley. Thank you very much, Kingsley.
Okay, so let's begin. I mean, it's, we've had all kinds of comments by the winners and the losers of the election petition. But, of course, as the saying goes, there can never be an end, Kieran, to the tide of opinions on the decision by the election petition tribunal. And just before the Supreme Court begins to take any appeal arising from the decision, but as well begin to evaluate matters arising. First, Professor Osumbo, give us a sense of what you think played out yesterday and what it means for not just our electoral jurisprudence, but also our democracy.
Well, thank you. I think the decision of the Presidential Election Appeals Tribunal, or court, yesterday was a reflection of a high level of diligence on the part of counsel on both sides, and perhaps even more so on the part of the judges who had it. I was very impressed by the quality and depth of the decision. Not just the lead judgment by the presiding judge, but also the concurring judgment. So where there were some gaps that needed to be further developed and addressed, the concurring judgments filled those roles. So I was quite impressed. And as you said, it's a judgment that people will continue to discuss and refer to in years to come.
Okay.
For me, it raised a number of key issues which we can begin to engage ourselves in as we move forward. One of them is the role of technology in our electoral system, in improving our electoral system. To what extent can we deploy technology, starting from the registration of voters to transmission and declaration of results? There are about 4 or 5 different stages that technology can be deployed. The second issue is the issue of qualification. What should be the qualification of candidates? I know, I'm aware that so many people have expressed concern once their attention was drawn to the definition of education up to school certificate level in section 318 of the Constitution. Many people expressed surprise that it can be as low as primary school education. So I know that we've addressed this before, but perhaps we need to reflect, and those Nigerians who were not aware should realize what the minimum qualification is for purposes of running for public office. Another issue is whistleblowing, because a lot of the talk that went into this case, and even perhaps formed the basis of this case, as we see, arose from information that was said to have been provided by a whistleblower. Whistleblowing in Nigeria so far has been more in the area of recovery of ill-gotten assets. Now we are seeing whistleblowing appearing in the political realm, in the electoral system. So we need to address the issue of whistleblowing more holistically in Nigeria. Yes, there's a need to protect whistleblowers, but there is also need to punish whistleblowers who misuse that mechanism, which is very useful, but it should not be abused. And there's a tendency for it to be abused unless strict penalties and checks are quickly put in place. And then lastly, the issue of the role of the media, particularly the social media, and the tendency of using the media to preempt the judgment, to second guess what the judges are likely or are, what some people expect them to pronounce as judgments. I think that is also very dangerous. It's worrisome, and the earlier we addressed it, the better. So these are about 4 or 5 key issues that I think I picked from the judgment yesterday, which we need to begin to interrogate and address more vigorously as we move forward. We can discuss each of these other things in greater detail.
As we make progress. Thank you very much indeed. Let's turn to Yunus Usman. Yunus Usman, you were the leading lawyer for INEC, and that judgment was unanimous. And as Professor Sumbo raised, there are a number of applications and petitions that will form part of the suit, like the issue of qualification and many others. So what was it for you in yesterday's judgment?
Yesterday's judgment is significant for one major thing. That is, you see, what people look at from the social media is totally different from what actually happened on the field. The electoral process or election cannot be won by the views of people, and most of these people particularly did not even vote. I'm sorry, some of your media houses have not been helping matters at all. And if you look at it like the issue of whistleblower, which Prof was saying, who announces election results? It's not supposed to be only the INEC chairman. Will a whistleblower be the one now to announce election results? And when this thing even came, we asked this man, what is your source? He said www.factsdon'tlienigeria.com. Will INEC create such a server? I mean, he childish. When we asked him again, who created it? He said somebody he did not know, a whistleblower. Like Prof was saying, I think we should be careful not to set this country on fire. Don't say anything you are not sure of. And then we thank Almighty God that the members of the panel did a very thorough job, painstakingly took every step in analyzing all these things. And our fear, my own fear for this country is that if we don't stop this issue of fake news, saying something, you say you were told, if somebody asks you, who told you, you say, it's my grandfather's father who told me, and so on. We are not helping in this country at all. What really happened is what the court decided yesterday. And please, let us take facts that we can prove. Not what we cannot prove at all. They are even elementary ones. Like you say that somebody who had been a head of state before was not qualified to be a candidate for an election. And this issue of qualification, like Prof said, is a very, very fluid one. You don't even need a primary school certificate to contest for presidency of this country. Once INEC is satisfied that you can communicate in English language, you are qualified. And I think my own warning, I won't talk much because the case may go to Supreme Court. I won't talk much, but we should be careful about what we say. So far, we are not careful. And some of your news media houses are not helping matters at all. Giving judgments even before judgment. And on facts that, maybe on facts don't lie, that do not exist.
You are not including NTA as part of that castigation?
No, not yet. But you know me, if you do, I will include you.
No, but in this instance...
No, for the time being, I'm not including you.
No, because it's passed. The petition tribunal is already functus official. NTA wasn't part of that.
No, NTA has not been part of it yet, but I hope it will be part of it.
We won't be part of it. Now, let's bring in Dr. Abdulrahman Abu Hamisu, public affairs analyst. Your thoughts on the decision?
Well, for me, whatever decision that has been reached, I think it will enrich our jurisprudence and deepen learning for those that want to learn. For those that don't want to learn, they will bring their biases to bear on the judgment. And that has its own negative effect. The connection with that is the issue around fake news and the attempt to incite. But the advantage democracy provides or offers is people going to state their claims. And you have some group of persons that have been trusted with the responsibility to look at facts as they are being presented based on the principle of proving your case beyond reasonable doubt, that what you allege really impacted you negatively. A failure to do that will earn you no verdict that is of favorable disposition that you want to see. But again, let me say something quickly. There is a great disconnect between what happened on the field and what happened in the courtroom. There may be instances of abuses, of circumvention, of overvoting, but again, having the capacity to prove that in the courtroom becomes very, very difficult because of the processes that are involved. For instance, we have 774 local government, including the FCT, 777 or thereabout.
774.
774 all together. All right. Now, as a presidential candidate, having to gather evidence from the field and bringing it into courtroom may be a little bit challenging. And that is why after elections, for instance, INEC usually call in experts to look at what they got right, what they got wrong, what they needed to improve upon. So therefore, if we have to really do something that will enhance our electoral system, not minding the verdict, I think the loose ends here, though they may not be substantive enough to invalidate the outcome of the election. If we want people to still have confidence in the electoral process, then we should look at the electoral system to see what we got right, what we did not get right, and then see how we can improve on that. So that we don't lose the fact that we need to tidy up some of the things that we needed to work on to improve the electoral system simply because the verdict has gone this way. So the confidence that used to go into the electoral process that will make people to vote during election has to do with the capacity of the system to produce credible results that are believable. Then if we take it down to issue of the tribunal, yeah, there may be some lacuna here and there because it's a human endeavor. Nothing is perfect, nothing is 100%. And then the case was not proven beyond reasonable doubt. That does not mean that there were no allegations here and there. But if you take the election, on the basis of the swing analysis we did during the election, there are states that were traditionally APC states, they've gone PDP. They've gone PDP. And nobody has alleged anything untoward in those areas. So the other thing I want to allude to again is the penchant of our politicians to go to court. Whether they lost gallantly or otherwise, they want to go to court. Because it is believed that in the court, and there is this thesis, that it's better you rig and be taken to court than to be rigged out. It's a normal statement that politicians do use. So some politicians have this belief that by the time they get to the court, they can sort themselves through the system. But if the system is not willing to play games and the judgment go the other way, we invent a lot of theories that are negatively impacting the system to explain. Because what I've seen in Nigeria, no politician will come to accept the fact that I do not plan very well, or I do not mobilize very well, or that my resources was not enough. The cry all the time is, I'll be rigged out, I'll be rigged out, I'll be rigged out. In that way, you pass bulk of your own failings to the system or to some other persons that do not even have the capacity to influence the outcome. So I think as a people, as a nation, as institutions, we should be able to accept responsibilities. For instance, if you did not do well, you should be bold enough to say, well, this is my planning, but again, it did not go the way I wanted it to go, so I can improve, than to say it is the politicians, no, it is the police, no, it is INEC, no, it's not you. So these are some of the things that if we are not careful, it's not only going to impact the electoral system, it's not going to drag the judiciary down, but it was going to set the country on fire. And we should learn to separate our biases, our sentiment, from what the reality is. The reality is, once you go to court, you must be able to prove your case. If you cannot prove your case and the court decided otherwise, the next thing will be that the power of incumbency has been used against me. So the issue of, except if we're now saying, okay, once you go to court and allege that I've been cheated, you don't need to prove how you are cheated. Except if we're saying that. But if our court is based on the principle of proving your case beyond reasonable doubt, the people that are seated there will only listen to what you are coming to present, except if we have any evidence that there was Ghana must go that was passed under the table. But if no evidence to that effect, then it means the judgment is valid.
Yes, and you know what is said about rigging? I have been rigged out. Meanwhile, the person may have rigged in the previous election. Now, when you are not rigged out, you will not begin to complain. Overtake. Don't do overtake. All right, that's on the sunny part. Let's go to Port Harcourt, where we have Festus Uguche. Festus, I take it that you listened to the judgment, or part of the judgment yesterday, 9 hours of analysis and deliberation. I'd like you to do an assessment of what you watched yesterday, with, of course, emphasis on some facets of the law that were applied by the 5 judges to come to a unanimous decision.
Yes, thank you very much, Kirian. Like every other Nigerian, I sat through the entire judgment. I listened to it from start to finish. It's quite an impressive judgment. The panel was very thorough in their decisions, in their sieving of evidence, evaluation of facts, and what have you. It took that long period of time because of the clumsy nature of our adjudicatory system, electoral adjudicatory system. You see all manner of applications that shouldn't be there, challenging the lawyer's name, whether the name is the person who was called to the bar, who should have filed or who should have brought evidence. There's another one asking that the matter be struck out because the national identity scheme provision was not followed, and the ID number of under the national identity scheme is presented before the court. There's another one challenging the competency of the nationality of the petitioner, which some of them I think I will not use the word frivolous, but I think they are totally unnecessary. It is so because our judiciary system has not advanced from what it used to be from the 60s till this day, and that's apparently why the court is making reference to cases like Akin against Amobori and Jim Wobuda against Ono and all those cases. The adjudicatory system in elections have advanced beyond this stage, and this we have to take a very proper look at. I have some issues concerning the ascription of evidence, the extent to which probative value can be given to evidence before an electoral adjudication body. I think these issues can be resolved at the Supreme Court if the matter goes to the Supreme Court at the end of the day. There's also some issues relating to criminal allegations which are contained in the petition and which the court discountenanced on the basis that those parties were not joined. I don't think allegations in election petitions are strictly for the purposes of the individuals involved or the agencies involved. It is also for the purposes of ascertaining the credibility of the polls. This we should look at properly. We also look at the issue of the affidavits and all that. Well, the court took its time, painstaking efforts to read out the constitution, provisions of the constitution on the qualifications of a candidate for an election, went into reading out what qualification actually is under the law, what is meant by a qualification. There are other options, but I think I'm not very comfortable with the way that evidence is evaluated, in spite of the fact that it is very, very clear that by the provisions of the law which are read out, by the options that are available, the ability to read and write qualifies anybody eminently to contest for a presidential election. But I think that aspect of evaluation of that evidence involving the swearing of an affidavit, the non-attachment of the certificates to the document could breed very wrong precedents, and we have to be very careful here. What is important as far as I'm concerned is that our electoral system must go beyond the current state of affairs. And why we are here, it is still the way it is simply because there hasn't been reforms. Our very dear President Yaradua proposed reforms, constituted the Justice Ways Commission, and they came out with very beautiful reforms, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a roadmap to the conduct of free, fair, credible elections and for electoral adjudication system that's acceptable and credible. These things were thrown at the back door. Those years, the very people who are complaining now were the people who stopped that process from getting there. Because I think to a large extent that there are principles of electoral justice which we have thrown away. Because if you look at the Accra Declaration on the Principles of Electoral Justice, it's very, very clear and unambiguous to the effect that the primary purpose of every electoral adjudication is who scored the highest number of votes. But here in our own system, you see a lot of technical issues of technicalities coming to bog election adjudication, issues that are totally out of sync with reality, issues touching on extraneous matters like the issue of the national identity card scheme, the issue of whether the lawyer is the lawyer who is supposed to represent or the documents brought there are supposed to are meant essentially for the purposes of the adjudication. Those issues are totally out of sync with the reality of electoral adjudication in the 21st century world. We have gone beyond that, and I think there's serious need for reforms in our electoral system. The Ways Commission report is quite elaborate, and it talked about composition, it talked about funding, it talked about a whole lot of issues, unbundling INEC, and giving it divided functions, the Offences Commission, the Constituency Delimitation Commission, and all that to put all these things into proper perspective. For instance, the role of the military and the police in the last elections was not properly, as far as I'm concerned, articulated in the sense that Well, those rules are there, but you can't find them culpable in any way, and there's nothing the court will do to make pronouncements as to the merits or demerits of those rules, simply because they are not joined as parties, But we all know very well, to the extent that I understand, that their activities, if they impact negatively or positively in the electoral adjudication, should be looked into by the court, should be taken proper cognizance of by the court. And to that extent, I think that there's serious need for us to come together to agree that there's proper imperative for the reform, both of the electoral process. Of course, if you bring reformations in the electoral process, it will impact on the judicial adjudicatory system in terms of our elections. And that's my point.
All right. Thank you very much, Festus Oguche, for the very valuable points that you have raised, of course, along with the other issues that our guests in the Abuja studios here have also raised. One point that I would like us to follow through is, of course, in direct response to what Oguche said, which will appear to be contrary to the earlier position of Professor Osumbo. Professor Osumbo, you extolled the council in the petition. Here we are. Oguche is saying, look, when you evaluate some of the applications and motions, they seem to have been unnecessary. I mean, the tribunal spent almost 3.5 hours dealing with preliminary issues, and some of those preliminary issues included whether or not a counsel was duly enrolled at the Supreme Court as a solicitor and advocate, whether the petitioner was a Cameroonian or a Nigerian, or whether the vice president or that the petitioner will fail because there was no joinder of the vice president. I mean, some persons have been saying that in their layman's perspective that these are fairly elementary issues over which the court's time shouldn't have been wasted. Prof.
Well, as has been said, this is a human process, and there's no human process or system that is perfect. So if anybody, I didn't score the verdict 100%. So if there were lapses here and there, it's to be expected, because that is part of every human system. But the clarification I want to make here at this point is that, and the judges always say this, even yesterday it was emphasized that election petition matters are sui generis, meaning that they are of a special kind, of a special nature. What that means is that the entire process from A to Z have to be followed. So if, for instance, it says that a petition has to be signed either by the petitioner himself or his counsel, it is proper to inquire whether the person who has signed it, the signature there, is really a qualified legal practitioner. That is not frivolous. It is a requirement. It's one of the fundamental things. Before the matter can even be heard by the court, it has to be properly before the court. And to be properly before the court, it has to be signed either by the petitioner himself or his counsel, who must be a qualified legal practitioner, and there must be no doubt at all. So until the doubt was clarified by the court yesterday, the doubt remained as to whether the person who signed it is the one whose name appears on the roll of legal practitioners in Nigeria. It is not frivolous. And so many other things that people talk about. The case established that it was not necessary for that the affidavit that was deposed to by Mr. President didn't complied with Section 31 of the Electoral Act. And Section 31 of the Electoral Act says that the form or information supplied by the candidate must be accompanied by an affidavit deposed to in a federal high court or high court of a state of the FCT. That is what it says. It didn't include, that Section 31 didn't talk about certificate. It says that the form, the information which was completed and submitted to INEC by the political party must be accompanied by a sworn affidavit. So that is as far as that went. There is no reference to certificate in Section 31. But the issue of proof beyond reasonable doubt. Let me say, first of all, election petitions are not all necessarily required to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. It is where there's an allegation of crime, because Section 36 of the Constitution specifically says that nobody must be found or said to be guilty of an offense, to have committed an offense, unless and until the person has been given a fair opportunity to defend himself. So unless somebody was in court to defend an allegation that he committed a crime, it would be unfair for the man to be at home and he will hear that a court is finding him guilty of having committed an offense. That is the position of the law. Even though I would admit there are some cases where that was not the case. Some people were pronounced to have committed electoral offenses when they were at home, where nobody brought them before the court. But again, as I said, yesterday's judgment has reaffirmed some of the principles that have been well established before now, and then some that we have to learn from going forward. For instance, the issue of, as I started before, the use of technology. There is the technology is deployed in voter registration. That has been accepted. It wasn't always so. It was in the Electoral Act of 2006 that for the first time allowed electronic registration. Then use of card reader came in subsequently, I think, in the subsequent elections. There is no question about that at all. And the judgment yesterday emphasized that point. The next issue, which are very contentious now, is, of course, also accreditation, using of card reader for accreditation. How far can you use technology in collation? The issue of collation. Is there any provision for the use of technology in the collation of results? Is there any provision for the use of technology in transmission of results? So for voter registration, voter accreditation, and actual voting, provisions have been made for those in the law, but no provisions yet. So if we want, going forward, to use technology in collation and transmission of results, then this is a matter that the National Assembly should take up by way of reform of the Electoral Act. And other points that have been mentioned, the issue of qualification. Should there be a change? There's even a view. In some countries, they don't even have any requirement about qualification. So if you are popular and the people want to vote for you, let them vote for you. That it suggests some form of paternalism by insisting that the voters don't know what is good for them. Don't decide for them. If they feel that this man is a man of noble character, he can represent us well, why should it be your business, whether he's a professor, he's a PhD holder, or he's a primary school certificate holder? So these are things...
Yeah, that's clear. I know you want to come in. That's for qualification. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that, as a corollary, there will be no grounds for disqualification. I mean, assuming the person is a bankrupt, on sound mind, but...
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
Right.
With respect to educational qualification, which is really the issue before us.
That's right.
Yes, gentlemen, very important discussion we are having this morning. And I want to return to what some of the issues Professor Oguche raised with respect to some maybe laymen like us, we call it distractions in the court, but bringing in frivolous cases like type of educational qualification of President Muhammad Buhari, who has been involved in elections in this country over the years, who has been head of state and all of that. You are bringing it into adding it to a major suit for determining election the election results, you know, and the other ones of that Uzoku was not registered. Does it require a court to know whether Uzoku is registered or not? Don't they have a data of those who are registered to practice in the court? So these are some of the issues Oguche raised. And I'm coming to Yunus Usman, you know, who happens to be a senior advocate of Nigeria. Now, criminal cases are difficult to prove beyond reasonable doubt, no doubt about that. And of course, considering the fact that the electioneering and the electoral process is quite complex in Nigeria, so proof will be difficult. Now, recalling of cases or referencing cases, past similar cases, as first also raised, like Ono versus Moborio and all of that. Even Buhari versus Obasanjo was also referenced. As should that such be outdated, according to what Professor said? You know, are we going to continue to be reciting cases, similar cases, to be able to get judgment for a particular case that of yesterday?
You see, let me tell my brother something. Everything, apart from election, has a rule. Even in my village, before you eat food, your father will tell you, wash hand first. Why wouldn't you say, just go and start eating the food? That is a technicality. In law and in rules of human conduct, you can never avoid technicality. It's not possible. For example, the things they called yesterday as frivolous applications are not frivolous. If the law says, look, like Prof has said, that you are signing the paper, you are challenging the election. It's either you are the one who signed it to show that, yes, I'm the one who am challenging the election, or it is my lawyer. If you did not sign, and your lawyer did not sign, or the person who signed is not your lawyer, forget about law. How would somebody know that it is you and not somebody feigning to be complaining about that election? That is not technicality. That is a process of getting at what you are looking for. Is it really you who are challenging? It's not technicality. The things we look at as technicality in law are really made to achieve justice. For instance, there was another one he said. He said, why don't we just say who scored majority of lawful votes? Before you go to who scored majority of lawful votes, there is this technical aspect of it. What if somebody brings from CF 001 and some other things that are not certified and say they are from INEC, and he says he scored? There's one particular case where somebody said he scored 50 million votes already, and brings a document that are not certified. And the court said, yes, we have these documents, so they are not certified. They may be INEC documents, they are not certified. How are you sure that these documents are not genuine? Then the lawyer will say, look, you cannot admit these documents because they are not certified. And then you will say it's technicality. No, you are trying to know whether these documents are not fake, whether they are genuine. So technicality is part of human endeavor, not law alone. And the aim is to achieve justice. So please, it's not just that lawyers want technicality. No.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to skip. I just saw Oguche on air a while ago. I want to skip Abdulrahman in the meantime and return to Oguche. But taking along one of the points that Abdulrahman and Professor Sumbo and Yunus Usman SAN have also highlighted. First, Oguche, let's get your reaction to the matters on the table. Yes, we know that election petitions are sui generis, but should that be against the background of what we have seen in our adjudication process of election petitions, particularly of the presidential level, for the kind of things to be playing out? Some persons have even raised the question whether a presidential election petition is not useless altogether. Why embark on it? I'll give you some rundown. 40 years ago, we had the Second Republic, 1979. Awolowo, of course, went to court against Shehu Shagari. What came out of that was 12 2/3. Since 1979, no presidential election petition has been successful. come to the instant republic, 1998, right up until this particular moment. And you saw what happened in 2007. President President Umaru Yar'Adua admitted that, look, the election that brought him into office was flawed, which was then the basis of the Ways panel and the recommendations that it made. But if you read the Supreme Court decision on that petition, or the appeal arising from that petition, Justice Nikki Toby and several others, you will see, how the judiciary itself tried to manage it. But still, neither Atiku nor Buhari, who were petitioners in that election, appellants, neither of them got victory. So the question is, considering, one, the standard of proof, 774 local government areas, for you to prove, and the burden of proof, if you say that there have been crimes or offenses committed, whether rigging or otherwise, how do you go about this? And as the tribunal also heard yesterday, look, if you say that the security agencies have been involved, then they also should be joined. Whom are you going to join in those particular instances? Does that make useless the petition against a victor in a presidential election?
It's not about votes, but about counting. Like I said earlier, elections in Africa has been dogged with much controversy, specifically the post-election adjudicatory process, which has always been interfered with one way or the other, except in a few cases like we had in Kenya a couple of years ago or last year, where they annulled the presidential election. Then we have other cases, pockets of cases here and there. And this goes to establish the fact that the institutions are very, very weak, extremely weak. And there hasn't been much advancement in the domestic forum of each of these countries to connect with the international standards for elections. Recall that we have an African Union Declaration on the principles governing democratic elections in Africa. We also have the ECOWAS Protocol on Democracy and Elections, Good Governance. We have the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, Good Governance. Go take a look at all of them, and you discover that the primary purpose of every election is to get the mandate of the people, to get the people to express their fundamental rights of determining or participating in the process, either directly or by their own elected representatives. This clause is contained in almost all the international instruments, the African Charter, United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, the covenants, civil and political rights, economic, social and cultural rights. But to that extent, you discover that we have a lot of flaws and inadequacies in the election process in Africa. Not just the election process alone, but because the process is flawed in most cases, the adjudication, the post-election adjudication is always premeditated. And in so many ways, I think we have the bulk of this problem within our domestic arena. We are not impugning the decision of the tribunal yesterday. To the extent that it's correct, we are saying that we could make advancements to bring integrity into the process, bring sanctity into the process, and ensure that the will of the people prevail at the end of the day, that the sovereignty notion in our constitution, which relies on the people, is made factual, not just one word that can be pandered with anyhow. But be that as it may, I also look at certain aspects of that decision, which I think the Supreme Court will take its time to resolve at the end of the day. It may affect the decision, it may not affect the decision, but the essential thing is to streamline these things with prevailing developments in election standards globally. Elections are determined more by international law than by domestic law. That's why we have international observers coming in. And our electoral process must conform as much as possible with these standards. And not just that, the adjudicatory process, which I told you is contained in the Accra Declaration on the principles of electoral justice. Electoral justice must be established to give proper electoral rights to somebody who won an election and whose mandate has been stolen. It must be given to somebody who has been disqualified at the stage of the primaries and all that, to ensure that what is important is that the will of the people prevails at the end of the day, and people who lose elections do not just go and stand by and wait for the post-election adjudication and apply whatever, how do I put it, extraneous or whatever this thing, to influence these decisions to their favor. At the end of the day, what happens is that elections must not be determined by courts or by tribunals. Elections are usually naturally determined by the votes, the people. So the decision of any electoral adjudication that touches on elections must reflect the will of the people. The extent to which that will is reflected is quite proper and very, very silent.
Thank you indeed. We will return to you in the course of the program. For now, we're going to take a short break, but it's important to also raise, recall some of the issues that we've raised in this conversation. The question Kingsley raised shortly, for me, is quite apt, because since 1979, there has never been a petitioner, somebody petitioning against a president, after an election that has ever won the case. It's becoming a recurring decimal. Are there lacunas in our electoral laws, or is it in the practice of the law? Is it in the judgment pattern of the law, and all of that? We'll return to that, after this short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It is here again. For more information, participation, and sponsorship, please call these numbers. NTA TV, promoting learning.
Move now! The red light won't kill you! Move now!
To the disobey traffic law, they cause accidents. Me, I don't talk, say, I no go dey do am again, because change begins with me.
I will no longer endanger my life crossing the express. Instead, I will use the bridge, because change begins with me.
Oga driver, stop this bus now, won't come down. I be one carry me pass where they go.
Make I dey stop anyhow for road, they cause traffic wahala and accidents. So I go dey stop for the right bus stop, because change begins with me.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, thank you for staying with us. Now, Abdulrahman Abu Hamisu, let's bring you in here. You listened to Ugoche. I've also listened to other guests this morning. And before the break, I was making reference to the fact that, in the history of our country, there's never been a time when a petitioner in any election tribunal has been able to win, basically for obvious reasons, right? Because the much I listened to yesterday, that you have to prove any criminal allegation beyond reasonable doubt. So what's your thoughts?
Well, you see, I listened to Festus Obuche, and he was raising some issues, and he didn't even tell us the how. For instance, he said we need to bring integrity into the electoral process. How? This has been the question, and he didn't even address that. You see, as a politician, you don't contribute in creating a situation that undermines the laws, processes, and procedure governing an election. And after that, again, you take the same case to court. and you are a participant. Because what has been happening over time is our politicians have never told you that they will not rig. They've never told us, and they've never taken any vow that will not circumvent the process. INEC officials that we always claim to be induced is something that has to do with somebody that is willing to offer and somebody who is willing to take. None of us have ever said, okay, even the President Yar'Adua that we're talking about, this is what happened. He agreed that the election process was flawed. He didn't say, I was not going to accept the mandate. He said I was going to do what? I was going to reform the process. The honorable thing to do is to say, I will not accept the mandate because the process was flawed. But this is what has been happening. So you don't go out there, mobilize your talks, and together you create a situation that undermines the entire processes, and then you go back to the court to say the process was not free and fair, whereas you are part and parcel of that process. So sometimes our courts are left in a dilemma, whether to follow the petitioner to say, well, but by the time the counter-argument comes about what has happened, they are left in a dilemma. So some of these judgments that you've talked about are judgments that were meant to enhance peace, to maintain status quo, to allow peace to reign. And then we will say next time will be better. But this next time can only be better if as politicians, if as lawyers, not because we want money from our client. In case that we know that if we go to court, we are going to lose, we advise them to go to court. And by the time they go to court and the case is decided against them, the next thing they do is to gather before media and say, this judgment has been rejected, we are heading to a Supreme Court. But you know that if you get to a Supreme Court, you are not likely to get that judgment. So what do? All we need to do is to advise our client to say, look, this thing is not going to lead us anywhere. And that is why in some places, even in the United States, the Al Gore-Bush saga, we know what would have come out of it if they've gone to court. But for the sake of national interest, well, the problem in Nigeria is...
They went to the Supreme Court. Gore and Bush,
yes.
All the Florida votes,
yes,
they were decided by the Supreme Court.
Yes, but yes. In the end, they allow national interest to prevail than personal interest. What is happening in Nigeria is the fact that nobody is working for national interest. Majority of us were working for our own personal interest. So even as a politician, it is not about the people you want to lead. It's not about peace and order. It's about the perk of office. So the stake is even too high in Nigerian politics to the extent that politicians arrive from primaries, like the issue he was raising about frivolous applications. Now, if you look at two things, one is to achieve, if you take it from both ends. Let me cite one case. From the end of President Muhammadu Buhari's theme, the issue of Atiku is not a Nigerian was meant, if that has scaled to disqualify Atiku that is not even qualified in the first place to contest, not to even challenge the outcome of the election. If you pick the issue of the certificate, if you cannot prove that the criminal issues we brought to the court will be enough to nullify the election and make the country to go into another set of election, then we should get the president disqualified through he's not qualified, he cannot present certificate. So if you look at the case in itself, it was a battle to ensure that either we win and retain the mandate that was given to us, or that we get that very particular victory nullified. So the fight was whether to, ensure that the candidates are in a better position. One, the president is qualified, right? And that he participated in the election. And whatever is the outcome of the verdict, that he maintains whatever comes out of it, and which is the victory. Then on the part of Atiku, the lawyers on this end said it's not from Nigeria, it's from Cameroon, which means it's not. So at the end of it all, it's a win-win situation. That is the point he was making, where they said the president is eminently qualified. But to the people from the other side, it is a bad news to them. And from this end again, they said, Atiku is qualified to aspire because he's a Nigerian. To this end, it's a bad news because we don't want him to maintain that stand and challenge the election. So when he said the entire application process, affidavit and the rest is meant to give justice, you could see that balance is coming out right away. The other end is Atiku has achieved a victory. The victory is that he's a citizen of Nigeria. So not that he's not qualified to challenge this election. He can equally, if he's alive, he can participate in the next election, which is a victory. That case has been settled. President Muhammadu Buhari's issue of certificate has been put to rest. That is a victory to the camp of President Muhammadu Buhari. So the entire application process, it may look frivolous to some persons, but again, it is meant to enhance the process. Coming to issue of not winning, or not being able to win against an incumbent. I tell you, right from independence to this date, or right from when we started governance of 1979, you mentioned, majority of the cases that have been decided at the Supreme Court, we've all agreed that it is very difficult to prove your case beyond reasonable doubt, considering the complexity of Nigeria, the terrain, the challenges. Now, it is just to maintain law and order.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make reference to the Al Gore-Bush issue that you raised, whether there is a provision of such in Nigeria, because when he went to Supreme Court, the Supreme Court advised Al Gore he said, look, for the interest of the nation, because he wanted to recount, of the Florida votes, right? And then the court said, look, America first. Yes. America first. And the case ended there. Al Gore didn't go further. He
had nowhere else to go. But it was also a split decision. It was a split decision. And up to today, I mean, that's 19 years later. The jurisprudence of Bush and Al Gore, continues to generate a great deal of controversy in academic circles. Kirian, there are still some issues, of course. We say matters arising from the decision of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. We want to give opportunity now to our viewers to also air their views. And we have a number of twists. We'll quickly go through some of them and then return to our guests for the remainder of the time. Omogbala Hombabs, I only looked at it from the verdict angle, 5-mile panel, no dissenting opinion, not even one. I followed every case I followed the decision from the word go. I watched, I listened to the reasons backed up by the presidents in the decisions. So I wondered what locus I would make this. I wonder what issues would make the Supreme Court upturn the verdict.
Okay, Law Alpha C, I saw it coming that the tribunal would through this line of reasoning. The incontestable fact is that most Nigerians actually voted for President Buhari. So introducing insignificant and miniature reasons to turn the tide will not see the light of the day.
Now, Raji Abidemi says it's high time Atiku accepted defeat and prepared for the 2023 presidential election. I want to urge him not to go to the Supreme Court. God bless Nigeria.
Yeah, Abdul says the judgment delivered by the learned justices was elaborate and landmark. I expect the opposition, PDP, and its flag bearer to accept the judgment and join hands with the government to move this country forward. We have a lot of problems facing the country, needing urgent attention.
Now, Vic's master, I highly commend the panel of justices for meticulously reviewing and addressing the 5-count charges against Buhari. No, there were no charges against Buhari. Reviewing the petition to the extent that the petitioners were also satisfied. No, they have expressed dissatisfaction, but regardless, in his view, it's a landmark decision.
Law Alpha again, lawyers have to feed. So they justify and introduce moves clients make most of the time. So appealing the ruling would definitely amount to wasting time and the scarce resources.
Marshal Akemo, it's good for democracy and the rule of law in Nigeria. Alhaji Atiku and the PDP will still appeal the decision at the Supreme Court, according to their lawyers. But can they succeed on grounds of alleged non-qualification of President Buhari and electronic transmission of results?
Mike Anyako says the ruling was unprecedented in the annals of Nigeria's history and political emancipation. Kudos to the lordships for the effort and perseverance in writing and delivery of the judgment for more than 8 hours. Hopefully, junior lawyers must learn.
This is from Jules Etusi. I commend Atiku for going to court to challenge the outcome of the 2019 elections and not going to the street. The threat to democracy all over the globe is the absence of opposition. I urge the president to fulfill his part of the social contract to Nigerians.
Amarachi Namane, it's now affirmed by a court order that Buhari has a genuine certificate and Atiku is a Nigerian. People should stop fighting over them.
Amino Idris, let Atiku proceed to the Supreme Court. In law, any case that moves from the High Court to the Supreme Court always sets new precedents to legal practice. What happened yesterday in the presidential election is a display of Nigerian electoral law and not American or British. no, let's make a correction here. Says that in law, any case that moves from High Court to Supreme Court always sets new precedents to legal practice. If the case doesn't go beyond the Court of Appeal and it's not appealed, that's to say it's not appealed from the Supreme to the Supreme Court, that represents the precedent on the law.
Well, what
that's
new?
That's the principle of stare decisis.
What new? A layman like us will be expecting when, of course, you have to reference other similar cases in the past, even 40, 50 years ago, and to come up with a judgment of a present case. So,
no, that's relevant. That's part of the precedents you rely on. It's part of our legal system. Okay. Especially, you always talk about lacuna.
All right. Where do we go now? August says, it is clear from the analysis the judge made while reading the briefs that Atiku had no case to prove. I am very happy about the outcome.
Now, Amagbola, again, the winner should be magnanimous by extending the hand of fellowship to the opposition. The real dividends of democracy must be consolidated so that 50 million Nigerians who trooped out to vote for the APC as well as other Nigerians can enjoy democratic deliverables.
And finally, Ahmed Mohammed, he said the verdict given by the court was long overdue. Atiku was only trying to remain relevant and divert the attention of this government from focusing on important matters. But deep inside, he knows he didn't win the 2019 election.
Well, of course, the matter has been tested now at the court of first instance, which is the tribunal, and the verdict has been given. Just one issue, very quickly. I know it's a bit tight now for us to resolve this. We keep hearing, and I mean, for lawyers and for non-lawyers, this is the issue, that there is a mechanistic view that election litigation is sui generis. It is unique, it has its own way. But the question then must arise, considering the onerous burden that a petitioner faces, particularly where the constituency of the election is so wide, such as a presidential election, what is the purpose of election adjudication? What is electoral justice? Professor Sumbo.
Well, first, let me say that we are talking about post-election adjudication. And for me, that is better than to be talking about post-election violence.
That's true.
So it is good that we have this opportunity, this window of going to court instead of going to the streets and killing and burning and maiming. And to that extent, I also want to commend the petitioners for using the constitutionally laid down process for getting redress rather than taking the laws into their hands. It's very commendable. And it's been said that no presidential election petition has succeeded in the history of Nigeria. And therefore, it may be a waste of time. I don't share that view. The fact that none has succeeded in the past does not necessarily mean that one will not succeed in future. In Nigeria, it used to be said or believed by many people that you can never defeat an incumbent president in Africa or in Nigeria. But it has happened. An incumbent president was defeated. So I feel there is a possibility that in future, a petitioner in a presidential election petition can succeed. But I agree with you that the burden is very onerous. It's quite huge. We've been talking about 774 local government areas. Actually, my practice in election, as the law has always been, and as was emphasized over and over again yesterday, is to be proved unit by unit, not even local government, unit by unit. And I believe we have over 200 polling units in Nigeria.
You know, over 120,000 that we had, yes.
Yes, okay, 120,000. Yes. So it is quite a challenge to be able to prove malpractice in these units. Of course, I know that even in the petition yesterday, not all the states were challenged. So a petitioner can decide within the allotted days to him which units he wants to challenge. And that can be done successfully. It's not impossible to do that. So I want to believe that post-election adjudication has a good value and serves a good purpose, but we must continue to learn from every election. And I believe that a number of lessons will be learned from the election of 2019 and that further reforms will be made to the law. I don't want us to be trapped in the wise Electoral Reform Commission. Yes, there is a lot of wisdom in it, but it's not exclusive. It doesn't exclude other ideas and other initiatives from other sources. But we must be ready to continue to improve the system. And then very quickly, on the issue of precedent, because it's been said over and over again that people continue to refer to cases that are 50 years old, 100 years old. That is part of the law. That is what is called judicial precedent. And it goes to re-emphasize the point that there is consistency. Actually, law is supposed to be a predictable science. As an undergraduate, we were trained to know that law is a predictable social science. But these days, for so many other factors, you cannot really predict what the outcome of a case will be. But judicial precedent is supposed to enable you to have a very fairly good idea how the case is going to end. So judicial precedent serves a good value, and we shouldn't see it as a minus to our adjudicatory system.
Thank you, Prof. But for some of us who are not lawyers, it's difficult to understand that. And you also know that there are cases that have been handled that resurfaced, after it's been handled, like the issue of a president's certificate. We've had it in 2015, and it came back again, So, and references have been made. In any case, well, as you said, that's the law practice in Nigeria. Let's return to Festus. Festus, just 40 seconds for you. What have we learned, going forward? And are you interested in Nigeria reforming our judicial system?
That's exactly the anchor upon which my thesis is anchored. Your guest in the studio there talked about me not providing solutions. I've been talking about reforms. I know precedence is part of our legal tradition, it's part of jurisprudence all over the world, and old cases come to apply in resolving new ones. But I did not make those references on the basis of stare decisis or precedents. I rather said about a departure from the current mode of elections and electoral processes and post-election adjudication processes to one that is much current with international standards. That's all. We know very well, and just as Professor Sumba alluded to, that election petitions, election adjudications are sui generis. And that is what it's supposed to be, because essentially it has to be a proper departure from common law and civil law principles. But then we see judgments of our courts on election petitions, particularly the one of yesterday, relying much on some of these civil and common law principles, like the issue of presumption of the correctness of elections, which was anchored on the provisions of the Evidence Act, the issues of onus of proof, the issue of ascription of probative values to evidence, to factual evidence, documentary evidence, the weights to be attached to them, or what to do with them. Elections are very special cases, like I told you. And this departure had been formulated not just for our domestic consumption, but by international law. Countries came together. Nigeria participated and said, look, there must be minimum standards for electoral adjudication. These standards will be embodied in the Declaration Principles. It's a declaration which was instigated by the United Nations Democratic Fund. Nigeria was party to it. And those declarations are there. The procedures are there. That the primary function of every electoral adjudication should be targeted at the votes. What I'm canvassing is a proper departure from the way things are done in terms of elections, because we have a more complex society now, and the complexity requires that certain things be done in tandem with international realities.
Festus Oguche, lawyer, friend, and regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, I would like to thank you for being with us on the program today. You joined us from our Port Harcourt Network Center. And back here in Abuja, we would like to, of course, appreciate all. I know that the senior advocate, Yunus Usman, has been itching to reply. Can you, very, very briefly, we'll give Oguche 40 seconds, we'll give you 30.
You see, first of all, let us correct this thing. We have our own laws governing our elections in Nigeria. We are not to import the laws of other countries. No, not at all. That election should be free and fair, yes, international. But unlike Oguche, I will not subscribe to the view that our electoral laws and systems should be governed by the laws of other countries. No, not at all. We have our own. Please, please. Let people not be misguided.
All right.
And two, you see, this view that that if a case doesn't go to the Supreme Court, it will make a law. No. Even if a case stops at the High Court,
that's right, and
there's no appeal from it, that is the law for the time being, as long as it is not challenged.
That's right. Okay. Yunus Usman, Leonard Senior Advocate, would like to thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria. Appreciation also to Dr. Abdulrahman Abu Hamiso, regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, public affairs analyst. Thanks for being around. Yeah. And also to Professor Osereme Osumbo, two-time senator, former governor of Edo State. Thanks for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria again.
Thank you very much, Kings.
Okay. What's happening on the sporting arena?
Nigeria 4x100 meters women, 4x400 meters women, and 4x100 meters men's relay teams have qualified for the 17th World Athletics